and welcome to Adventures with ADHD, where I get to speak to fabulous neurodivergent folk and they share their stories with me and you. Welcome, Sammi Ford. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad actually. Yes, quite. I'm feeling reasonably well today. Thank you.
Good, good. Well, I'm so glad to have you on the show. I'm just so excited to hear your journey because it certainly is an interesting one. But
Mm.
before we get into that, tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm obviously Sammi Ford. What you do, I presume that means work-wise. I've been running a family business now for over 25 years in industrial chemicals, air filtration. It's called SPCB UK. It's quite niche. It started when I was an Air Force officer, and after I had my first child, we moved to France, and I started working as a translator and interpreter for a chemist in France. Um, Saw the opportunity in the UK market, and basically came back to the UK and set up a business, an independent business, and we do import and export lots of different products now, B2B and B2C. So the sort of industrial filtration and air filters is B2B, but we also do things like herbicides, moss killers. There's mosskillers.co.uk. I sort of nabbed that quite early on because the internet was really just coming out, and that's also B2C. And yeah, that's going well.
Yeah, yeah, going
And
for a
in my
long.
spare time, I do, being neurodivergent, I don't stop there. So in my spare time, it's not just all work. I write poetry, I perform poetry, I paint occasionally and take photos. Won quite a few awards.
Wow. And what sort of things do you paint?
Um, I've dabbled in everything really. It was one of those. It was supposed to be good for my mental health, but it became. I was a bit of a perfectionist, and yeah, say did well. It can be, but it was anything. I sort of tried a bit of everything. Drawings, oil, acrylics. I sort of had to have all the tools, all the canvases, and then realized that this actually isn't a hobby after all. This is turning into another job. I will. I sort of then I stood back and did more writing. I will get back into the painting eventually, but I'm aware now that I'm not one to just do it for the journey. I'm often wanting to get to the destination, which
Wow.
is a little bit of a bit of a negative, really.
Yeah,
I can
yeah,
burn out quite easily.
that perfectionism can be be tricky. And poetry, tell me about your poetry.
Yeah, being a linguist, I thought I'd be creative with words. I am writing a story about me and about my the diagnosis, etc. But the poetry is it's shorter. It doesn't take so much time, uh, and you can be quite creative with it. Use metaphors and things. But yeah, it's very good for putting feelings down as well. I find it quite cathartic, really.
Yeah.
But I've been published in a few anthologies, so we'll see where I just go with the flow. I know I'm one of these ideas people. I never say no to anything. Just go with
Yeah,
whatever.
amazing. Okay, cool. So, can you tell us about your journey to discovering that you're neurodivergent?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I always say actually, if you want to, at the moment, my stuff is on Sammi Ford Art on socials and things. If anyone wants to look at my stuff,
We'll
uh,
share that.
yeah,
We'll include your links within the show notes, and then people can take a look, definitely.
yeah. Yeah. What led to the diagnosis? Well, it wasn't a very, very nice experience. I'll be honest with you. About the same time we had COVID, we had Brexit, which impacted obviously the import and export side of my business. And my children had just about, well, they'd left home for university between them. There was one still here, but um, obviously during COVID, it was very difficult to keep in touch with them. They weren't, and that sort of thing. But I also had the menopause, and it was all at the same time. And I thought I was going mad. I would burn. I wasn't actually. I now know it wasn't so much burnout as shutdown.
Right.
and it was like it was quite acute, really. So, I'd go to bed sometimes for a few days,
Mm.
um, and it was just from being an Air Force officer who and having learnt to fly and run this business and everything else, I suddenly couldn't cope. And I'd go to bed on, maybe on a Sunday night, say, and I just wouldn't wake up till Thursday. And then occasionally I'd get taken into hospital um, because I hadn't eaten and drank. Um, and I just thought I was going mad. And there was a lot of blame on me as well. People, it was sort of my fault. I missed things, I missed appointments, and it was just awful. But I did have the forces mental health team that followed me up, and I think it was my daughter that sort of mentioned about the autism. I hadn't really thought about it, even though I've got autistic people in my family, quite a few of them. It hadn't really occurred to me because I was female, obviously. I'd got through my 50 years without an issue. I coped with things. I didn't have an educational disability. And but I did mention it, and they put me forward for diagnosis. And then when I was diagnosed, autism first and ADHD after, I started to look into it. Just like, oh my God, is that what happened? And then the more I looked into it when I was sort of writing about it as well and giving talks, because I also give talks about it sometimes, the more I found that correlation between menopause
Yeah.
and neurodivergence. And I was just like, that's what happened. And I'm coming out of it now. I mean, occasionally I'll have burnout, but recognizing it was good. But also the fact that it was at that same time. And I'm very passionate now about writing and talking about it because I don't think enough's known about what an impact menopause can have on you if you've got neurodivergence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Okay.
it's uh it's more and more people are talking about it now, aren't they? And more people like yourself are discovering during the menopause when all of those hormones kind of drop and then yeah, I mean you were kind of in bed for days then.
Yeah, I know now because I'm having to, I'm learning to pace myself and things. But because of this perfectionism, because of this drive, this ambition, which is work. I mean, if it wasn't for neurodivergence, I don't think in some respects I'd be where I am today, business wise. But this drive to always be good, always be the best, always get there, keep go and just keep going and keep going and keep going.
Yeah.
It that I was going through burnout, uh, but then my brain literally stopped. You know, I couldn't eat, I couldn't talk. It literally slept, and I can only. It's like a bit like my computer having all the tabs open or all the unopened emails, and my brain was saying I can't do anymore, and it was like a computer crashing,
Yeah.
basically.
Wow. I'm glad you're kind of now you've got your diagnosis, you know what's going on, and that's informing you in terms of managing your energy and stuff. But I'm fascinated. Tell me about your career in the Royal Air Force. That must have been interesting.
Yeah, and the more I write for the memoir, the more I recognise these neurodivergent traits. I was determined. It was, right, I'm going to join the Air Force, from a very young child. I joined the Sea Cadets because females in the Air Cadets couldn't fly. And I thought, that's not fair. So sod you then, I'll go and join the Sea Cadets instead. And I applied for a sponsorship through the Air Force for university to study languages. And I knew when I walked in that I was going to get it because I knew everything about every plane and everything about, what was military conflicts around the world. I'd studied it. And then it was quite funny when actually we're talking about getting in at the moment, but I remember this hangar exercise where we had to get across the hangar pretending that it was like a water using things like tires and that. And all these people were like in a crowd and screaming to be in charge, a bit like the first episode of The Apprentice, And
Yeah.
I just thought I can't handle that. And then I realised that I could just do it by myself. So I went off and just did it by myself, and some people started to follow me, and I didn't actually climb the wall that was in the middle of the room because they hadn't told me to climb the wall, so I just walked around the outside. And I
Brilliant.
remember the officer sort of writing on his little pad. Yeah, okay, then she doesn't do what people tell her to do. But I got in, so I got sponsored through the Air Force. I then joined the Air Squadron at university and learnt to fly a plane. Did some parachuting, went to Bosnia. At one point, I was in charge of all the helicopter spares around the world. Yeah. No, it's good. It was good. I was in training was very hard actually. The actual physical officer training because they put one woman or one female in each sort of male group, male flight, and but I was so determined to get through that I think that's one thing that I've always had is determination and that sense of injustice that neurodivergents have.
Yeah.
If they can do it, then so can I.
Yeah. So do you think being neurodivergent helped you get into the Air Force and with that determination and helped you get to where you are?
Without a doubt, but it also hindered me, you know, things like organisation sometimes,
Mm,
during training, sometimes you'd have to be on parade at 6 a.m. and I was always last out.
yeah,
Um, and so there was a little bit of a stigma. Um, but yeah, that's how I got in. I think at the end of the day, it was that I had that foresight as well at such a young age to get the sponsorship.
yeah,
Knowing that if I joined them, I mean, I wasn't particularly military minded, to be honest. It was because I knew that I could leave home and have my accommodation and my food and get paid at university. I sort of planned my life out from probably about 12 years old, you
yeah.
know.
And what's it like flying a plane?
I was told I wasn't a natural,
Oh,
which just surprised me because I think a couple of reasons. I drive quite manically, but obviously you've got the cockpit and all the dials. Well, it wasn't intuitive. Flying wasn't intuitive for me. It wasn't like riding a bike or whatever. I had to know what each dial did, and I analysed everything. So, but it was fun. We did some aerobatics
mm,
and yeah, lots of things. It was an achievement at the end of the day. I didn't do much flying once I went solo because the deal is that it was a different time then. Women had only just been allowed to fly, you know. So because I wasn't going to be a pilot, they weren't going to take me on further. But just having that experience is something that I've
yeah.
enjoyed. In fact, it was not only recently I took all three of my children parachute jumping, got them to jump
Well,
out of a plane. So
yeah. And what was it like being in a male-dominated environment?
I didn't mind that. I've always got on really quite well with men, um, potentially more than some females, really. I don't think I've ever felt that I've needed to be in a group or a clique, and it didn't really mean, and it wasn't that well. It was fine, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Quite the journey, quite the adventure. So,
But then when you see my business on the B2B side, of course, in the paint spraying industry, that's very male dominated as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's a lot of us neurodivergent people. We don't think in terms of, oh, in terms of gender. I'm of this gender, so I have to be a certain way. Just like get the job done, and if I'm interested, I'll do it, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
you treat them as people at the end of the day, and I all the people I meet, I don't really think about them in a particular category as long as they're nice people. And it's the
Yeah,
same with business. I've just been talking to somebody else about this. I the customers, whether it's B2C or B2B, I treat them all equally, really, and as human beings, and I help them as people, and that the value from the business is the fact you're helping people rather
yeah,
than profit and things in some ways.
yeah, yeah. No, those gender roles can really get in the way of things. So when you're not thinking along in those ways, you can get stuff done. So
Mm.
you talked about a story about when you were kind of in that hangar and you walked around the wall because nobody had said you have to go over it. Any other stories up your sleeve?
There's so many really. Yeah, we can go back onto that people to people thing, actually, using that as continuing that. I remember being obviously a linguist in the Air Force. I was given the job of looking after the Austrian Chief of Defence Staff during a military conference, and we were mobile phones weren't big. Well, just come out, so I think they were really big things. But I was given a chauffeur, and I was given a mobile phone, and I had to take him and his entourage to go meet Michael Portillo. And I just got on with it again. I just treated him like a human being, and we got on really, really well. And I just remember afterwards him saying to me, "I'd really like to see a bit of London while I'm here." So I said, "Yeah, okay, then why don't we?" So I said, "What? Can we just use the taxi driver?" Yeah, why not? And he was a bit of a lad, and I basically took him on a pub crawl around London, and nobody knew who he was, you know. Yeah, and I got this wonderful letter back to my sort of commanding officer to say what a wonderful time he'd had. I'm sure it probably wasn't the official way to do things, but yeah, I really enjoyed that actually. So yeah, I did that, and also when I set up the business, I remember again in this particular factory, obviously lots of men, and being a smallish woman, I'd go in and I'd have overalls on, and I'd get in and I'd be digging out paint out of spray booths and things, and it's just like I was just seen as like, oh, here comes Sammi again, you know. But yeah, I think that there are some real good benefits, I think, to sometimes thinking out the box, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what would you say to other people who are kind of late in life identified neurodivergent, and it can feel a bit confusing and they can feel a bit lost. So, what would you say to them to help them?
Yeah, I've met some people that have been literally diagnosed from 60s and 70s. It's unbelievable, really. I think the first thing is I think the most important thing is you've always been neurodivergent. You can't grow into it. So the fact that you now know means that you can do something about it. You know, you can use the spoons theory. You can stop blaming yourself, and think of it as a positive instead of a negative. I don't particularly see it as a disability in some respects. It's just a way that your brain works in a different way, and what is typical as well. I mean, maybe who is typical? Maybe the typical is societal norms. You know, and we need society and we need norms, obviously, but at the same time, we also need people that don't fit into that category. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to share with us before we kind of sign off?
Um, I don't think so. No, I think just I say the passion. I've got the. I love my business. I love the fact I work. You know, I've got that freedom, etc. But I'm now using my values a lot more into the speaking and the writing, and I think the more that we talk to each other, like you are, a wonderful job, and the more that we get things out there to other people, I just think the better life will be in general for everybody, you know. And I think that I mean, I was given antidepressants at one stage, which I didn't need. I knew I didn't need it. And I think if I'm fascinated with how the mind works. And if we thought more from sort of the source of problems instead of always putting a sticking plaster on a wound, I think it would solve a lot of issues. And I think that we should all just be talking more about it and getting rid of the stigma, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right. By talking about it, the shame that many of us have felt over the years, um, kind of has nowhere to fester anymore. So these conversations are so important. So thank you for coming on. Where can people find out more about you? You've got a website, have you?
Yeah, from the business point of view, we've got spcb.co.uk, and mosskillers.co.uk is more the gardening and the home maintenance. And then I've got sammifordart.co.uk, which is more my art and poetry. although I may have to set up another one because I've been told not to put art on it. But I'm one of these people that collects things. Here we go, some more unopened emails. It's how many website names do you have?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a few at the moment, but I won't say any more. I won't say how many website names I own.
Okay. Yeah, that good old collection. And yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your story and and for helping others by sharing it because so many people will benefit from it.
Yeah, and you too, the work you do. It's really good. It's really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you.